A warm welcome to the sixth and final film in our Structural Members series. We thought it would be useful to show you some typical structural member span widths and dimensions. The thickness of a wall depends on the load it is to bear, its height, and how it is supported. Freestanding walls need to be thicker than walls that are supported at the top and/or laterally. A symmetry wall will be at least 24 cm thick if it's made of masonry and at least 20 cm thick if it's built in reinforced concrete. The bricks or blocks that make up a load-bearing masonry wall will measure at least 11.5 cm in width. A reinforced concrete wall will usually be at least 14 cm thick, though for structural and other practical reasons it's more likely to measure at least 20 cm. When a reinforced concrete slab carries its load in one direction, it's referred to as a one-way slab. Its maximum span width should not exceed 6 meters. Two simple formulae are used to specify slab thickness depending on whether or not the slab is to support partition walls. Here are two examples. A span width of 4.2 meters divided by 35 plus 4 centimeters gives a 16 centimeter thick slab without partition walls. A span width of 4.9 meters squared divided by 150 plus 4 centimeters requires a 20 centimeter thick slab if it is to support partition walls. When a reinforced concrete slab carries its load in two directions, we call it a two-way slab. Its maximum span width should not exceed 7 meters. The thickness of a two-way slab is calculated on the basis of its shortest span width using the same formulae as for a one-way slab. Here's the calculation again. If the shortest span width is 4.9 meters and the slab is not intended to support partition walls, the calculation is 490 divided by 35 plus 4 equals 18 centimeters. The maximum dimensions produce a very thick slab. 6 times 6 divided by 150 plus 0.04 equals 0.28 meters, that is 28 centimeters. As you can see, this slab weighs almost twice as much as in the first example. A fat slab is a slab supported by columns alone. Irrespective of how small the supporting width may be, these floor slabs must always be at least 20 centimeters thick in order to prevent the slab from shearing off at the column bearing. This is known as punching shear. As a general rule, the span width is no more than 7 meters. There's also a useful rule of thumb for calculating the dimensions of reinforced concrete beams. The beam height should be roughly 1/10 of its span width and is even easier to calculate than dividing by 35. The beam width should be half to 1/3 of its height. Here's an example. A beam spans 6 meters and is therefore 60 centimeters high and between 20 and 30 centimeters wide. The dimensions of timber beams are specified in a similar manner, but they can be slimmer. The height is roughly 1/20th of the span width. The width should be 1/2 to 1/3 of the height, but for structural reasons, it's always at least 10 centimeters. Here's the calculation. With a span width of 4.00 meters, the beam would be 20 centimeters high and between 6.7 and 10 centimeters wide. In this case, the minimum width of 10 centimeters would be chosen. Irrespective of the span width, the height of a beam subject to bending is always between 1/10 and 1/30th of its span width. The actual height depends on a variety of factors including the material, load conditions, shape, and structure of the beam. A beam with a 30-meter span would therefore measure at least 1 meter and rarely more than 3 meters in height. Columns made of solid timber, that is, of wood cut directly from a tree, are generally centrally loaded and have square cross-sections. They usually have an edge length of between 10 and 20 centimeters. It's no longer economically viable to obtain timbers with square cross-sections of 20 by 20 centimeters from trees. For structural reasons, in particular the inclusion of reinforcing rods or mesh, reinforced concrete columns should have an edge length of at least 20 centimeters. There is theoretically no limit to the size of the cross-section. Summary. Load-bearing walls are at least 11.5 centimeters thick. The approximate dimensions of reinforced concrete slabs are specified using the formulae length divided by 35 plus 4 centimeters without and length squared divided by 150 plus 4 centimeters with partition walls. Flat slabs are at least 20 centimeters thick, beams between 1/10 and 1/30 of their length high. Timber columns have cross-sections of 10 by 10 centimeters to 20 by 20 centimeters, reinforced concrete columns at least 20 by 20 centimeters. Our next series of films looks at foundations. We hope that you will be able to join us.